Welcome back. Now, weeks of pressure from across the political spectrum led to the National Treasury withdrawing its proposed VAT hike. Scrapping the VAT increase necessitated a reduction in spending to maintain a neutral impact on the budget deficit. And joining me to unpack the allocations made to tax is CEO of the South African Institute of Taxation, Keith Engel. Thank you so much for your time, Keith. After the last budget 2.0, I actually had a conversation with John Steenhuisen, and he made a very interesting point that the revenue that the VAT hikes were going to cover were about 1.66% of the budget. And he really couldn't understand why we couldn't just redirect spending to actually cover that. And I'm wondering, did we have to wait so long? Was the rope for Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana so tight that we had to wait this long to actually get the budget that we got today?
Well, I think the issue has been is that they were on a different policy trajectory. They were actually trying to increase the size of government a lot more. So if you heard him a few months ago, he was pushing to have major increases in social spend and a number of areas for government, public sector, as well as the parastatal. So for him, he was trapped in an ideology of bigger and bigger government. So what you've seen here is they've scaled back their growth plans, they've reallocated, but they've also hidden some of their tax increase. So one, they've relied a little bit more on SARS to get more money. And two, you'll see that they haven't adjusted the personal income tax rates or thresholds at all. So they're hiding some of their tax increases through inflation just by not doing anything. And then they're also doing a bit of fuel levy. So, but it was an ideological shift. They were being forced out, and that's why they were having the fight.
Yeah, and it's actually quite interesting because the reason why there was so much backlash on VAT was that it is a regressive tax. It means that there'll be less household expenditure. Of course, you know, the impact that it would have had on inflation, monetary policy, and the like. And I'm wondering now, you talk about this tax bracket creep where they don't adjust people's salary increases for inflation. Does that then not throttle household consumption, or is it to a lesser extent than a VAT hike?
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, I would argue that it really depends. So one of the problems here is that we're overstating things. While that may be a bit regressive, in absolute monetary terms, it hits the middle and it hits the lower, the working classes a lot more, because the poor has a lot less to spend. So yes, in a percentage wise, it hits the poor more, but in absolute numbers, it's hitting the middle. Now you're hitting the middle and the working poor just slightly differently. And you're not hitting the absolute poor at all, but yet it does have an effect. So it's not like it's free. At all. And I think one of the problems, we keep thinking, well, oh, gee, nothing is happening here. But the real difficulty is we continue to get the bulk of our money from the working middle and the working poor and the working upper. Yes, you can get some from the super rich as well, but your big money always comes from the middle and the lower. And as long as we're on this trajectory, and they're talking about they want to get an additional 20 billion next year, that they keep wanting to get more. Yes, some will come from the rich, but at the end of the day, your big money is working middle, working poor, and that's strangling households, and that strangles consumption. And frankly, there comes a point where the working middle and the working poor just can't handle the rest.
Yeah, well, that tax adjustment has now been readjusted shifted rather to the fuel levy. What do you make of that?
Say that again, I couldn't quite hear.
I was saying that tax adjustment has now been shifted to the fuel levy. What do you make of that increase?
Well, they just made it inflation. So one of the things they were sensitive to is that for the poor, that fuel levy hits them a lot harder. So they said, okay, well, we're not going to go after you in VAT. We're just going to hit you on the fuel. So really, it's like a slight increase. It's comparable to a VAT increase on fuel, which makes a big difference for commuters and for people getting around. So that does hit the poor. Yeah. And unfortunately, this is, by itself is not a big deal. The problem is all of our fuel charges have actually become very, very high next to the actual cost of oil. So cumulative over time, that is a major cost on the working poor and the actual poor. Middle two somewhat. If you've got a lot of commuting costs, the only way to offset that is that where people are working part-time and remote. But now what's happening is people are getting back to work more and more. So those fuel charges are having a greater effect. But again, in absolute terms, it's really hurting the working class the most.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your nuggets there on the tax landscape in South Africa on the back of the budget that was tabled today. Keith, that was Keith Engel, CEO of the South African Institute of Taxation.